The squad car's lights strobed red and blue across my barn as two officers walked Karen off my own property in handcuffs. 3 months ago she told the whole neighborhood I didn't deserve to own this land. Tonight, she learned exactly whose name is on the deed. My name is Anna Whitfield and I raise goats, chickens and a stubborn orchard on 6 acres just past the cul-de-sac gate. I bought this farm with my late father's savings, a dream we shared before cancer took him 2 winters ago. I never wanted trouble. I wanted tomatoes, quiet mornings and the smell of hay after rain. Then Karen Doyle became HOA president and quiet mornings became a thing of the past. She swept into the neighborhood association like a storm front, clipboard in hand, smile sharp as a blade. Within a month she'd sent me my first violation notice, for unsightly agricultural equipment, visible from the road. That equipment was my father's old tractor, the one he taught me to drive when I was 9 years old. I laughed it off at first. Surely this was a misunderstanding. Surely reasonable people could talk this through. I was wrong. Karen didn't do reasonable. Karen did control and she had just found her favorite new target. The farm sat on a strange legal edge. Grandfathered in before the HOA existed, a fact Karen conveniently ignored. My father fought that battle decades ago and won a signed agreement protecting agricultural use. I never imagined I'd need it again. But paperwork means nothing to someone who believes the rules exist only for other people. Karen's notices multiplied. Chicken coop too close to the fence. Goats disturbing the peace. Compost pile attracting vermin. Every letter arrived with a fine attached and every fine grew larger than the last. I tried calling her directly. She let it go to voicemail. Then emailed a form response citing community standards. Community standards, apparently, meant whatever Karen decided that week. Enforced with the fury of a woman who'd never once been told no. Neighbors murmured that she'd run off 2 prior families this way. Families who simply sold and left rather than fight. I wasn't planning to fight. I was planning to survive. But surviving Karen, I'd soon learn, required a whole different plan. The first real spark came on a Tuesday morning when I found a court-style summons taped to my mailbox. Immediate compliance required, it read, threatening a lien on my property if I didn't remove my animals within 10 days. My hands shook reading it. 10 days to erase everything my father built? Over a technicality Karen invented herself. I drove straight to the HOA office, only to find Karen sipping coffee. Unbothered, as if she'd been expecting my visit. It's nothing personal, Anna, she said, smiling with her whole face except her eyes. Rules are rules. I told her about the grandfather clause. She waved a manicured hand and said the paperwork had conveniently gone missing in a filing update. Convenient indeed. I left that meeting with a cold, sinking feeling that this was no accident at all. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my father's old desk and pulled out every box of his files. Somewhere in this house was the original agreement. I just had to find it before Karen's 10-day clock ran out. I found a torn folder labeled HOA, Do Not Lose in my father's careful handwriting, tucked behind old tax returns. Inside was a notarized 1998 agreement, signed by 3 past HOA board members, permanently exempting this farm from livestock restrictions. My hands trembled holding it. This wasn't just paper. This was my father's voice, still fighting for me from beyond the grave. I made 4 copies that night, 1 for me, 1 for my lawyer friend, 2 hidden in separate safe places. The next morning I mailed a copy to the HOA board, certain this would end things. It did not. Karen's response came fast. The agreement was outdated and superseded by newer bylaws she herself had drafted last year. Convenient? Again. She'd rewritten the rulebook specifically to erase the one clause protecting me. I realized then this wasn't about chickens or tractors. Karen wanted my land. Or wanted me gone and she'd built the machine to do it. A neighbor, Dolores, pulled me aside at the mailbox. She did this to the Alvarezes too, she whispered. They just left. Dolores said Karen had once falsely reported a resident's dog as dangerous to force a fine, then adopted the family's yard sign business for the HOA's use. I started noticing the pattern. Every violation targeted someone quiet, someone unlikely to fight back in public. Except I wasn't quiet by nature. I was quiet by grief. And grief, I decided, was about to become fuel. I began documenting everything, every letter, every timestamp, every inconsistency in Karen's story. I photographed my property daily, dated and geotagged. Proof no violation actually existed. I requested official HOA meeting minutes through a formal records request, a right every homeowner technically has. Karen stalled for 2 weeks, then sent partial minutes with entire sections blacked out for privacy. Privacy? In an HOA meeting about a chicken coop? That excuse told me more than the minutes ever could. I hired a young attorney named Priya Shah, recommended by Dolores, who specialized in HOA disputes and clearly relished a good fight. These boards overreach because nobody pushes back, Priya told me. You push back correctly and they crumble fast. She filed a formal request for the complete, unredacted board records, citing state HOA transparency statutes. Karen's team had 30 days to comply. I marked the date on my kitchen calendar in red ink. In the meantime, the fines kept coming, now totaling nearly $4,000, threatening a lien on the farm itself. I paid nothing. Priya said paying would look like an admission the violations were legitimate. Karen escalated. She started parking near my fence line, just checking, snapping photos of my goats through the rails. One afternoon she brought a clipboard onto my actual driveway, measuring the distance from my coop to the property line. "You're on my land?" I called out, stepping outside. She just smiled. HOA business supersedes personal boundaries, Anna. It did not. But she said it with such confidence that for one dizzy second, I almost believed her. I recorded that entire encounter on my phone, her voice clear as day claiming rights she never had. That video would matter more than I could have imagined, though I didn't know it yet. 2 nights later, someone left my chicken coop gate wide open. Every hen was gone by morning. I found tire tracks near the coop that didn't match my truck, my neighbor's car, or the mail carrier's route. I filed a police report, more out of documentation than hope. The officer barely hid his skepticism about a chicken theft, but I kept the tire tread photos anyway. In this fight, nothing felt too small to record. Karen, notably, mentioned the missing chickens in the very next HOA newsletter, calling it proof my coop was poorly secured. How did she already know about the theft before the police report was even public? That question kept me up at night. I brought it up to Priya. She went very still. "That's not a coincidence, Anna. That's a confession dressed up as concern. We couldn't prove it yet, but a theory formed. Karen, or someone working for her, had let those hens loose herself." I started installing motion sensor cameras around the property, wiring the footage to save automatically off-site. Within a week, the cameras caught something I hadn't expected at all. A car matching Karen's description idled near my fence line at 2 a.m. Had lights off, engine running. The footage was grainy, plate half obscured by mud, but the silhouette behind the wheel was unmistakably her build. I didn't confront her yet. Priya's advice echoed in my head: gather everything first, strike once, strike hard. Meanwhile, the 30-day deadline for unredacted records arrived. Karen's team requested an extension due to office relocation. There was no office relocation. I'd driven past the HOA office that very morning. Same building, same sign, same everything. Priya filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Division, citing willful obstruction of a legal records request. For the first time, Karen's confident tone cracked slightly in her next email. "This is becoming unnecessarily hostile," she wrote. Hostile. As if documenting theft and harassment was somehow worse than committing it. At the next open HOA meeting, I showed up. Every resident had the right to attend and I intended to use mine. Karen's smile faltered the second I walked through the door, folder in hand. Priya one step behind me. She tried to skip public comment, rushing through the agenda. But 3 neighbors, including Dolores, demanded I be heard. I stood and read the notarized 1998 agreement aloud, watching board members' faces shift from confusion to concern. "This document was never legally superseded," Priya added. "Any bylaw change ignoring an existing agreement is void on its face." Karen insisted the paperwork was fabricated. I calmly handed the original, notarized, dated and signed, to the board secretary. A ripple went through the room. Two board members exchanged a look I recognized instantly: doubt. Karen adjourned the meeting early, visibly rattled. But not before another resident stood and said, "This happened to my sister too." That resident was named Marcus, and what he said next changed everything I thought I understood about this fight. Marcus claimed Karen had borrowed thousands from the HOA reserve fund for landscaping nobody in the neighborhood had ever seen. The board treasurer, an older man named Walter, went pale. He hadn't approved any such withdrawal, he said quietly. Walter promised to personally review the HOA's financial records that week. Karen suddenly insisted the books were with the accountant. Convenient? Again. Everything inconvenient to Karen was always with someone else, being updated, or temporarily unavailable. I left that meeting shaking. Not from fear this time, but from something new: momentum. Priya called it the pivot point. The story was no longer just about my farm. It was about Karen herself. That night, Dolores texted me a photo: Karen's SUV parked outside a landscaping company that didn't exist in any public directory. I forwarded it to Walter. He forwarded it to the HOA's insurance auditor. The wheels, slowly, began to turn. For a few days, an eerie calm settled over the neighborhood. No new violation notices. No clipboard visits. Nothing. I should have known better than to trust the silence. Karen wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. The quiet ended with a certified letter announcing an emergency HOA vote to revoke agricultural exemptions, HOA-wide. It named no one directly, but everyone knew exactly whose farm this targeted. Karen had learned she couldn't win with lies about paperwork, so she tried to rewrite the rules themselves. Priya said this move was actually a gift. It would put Karen's overreach in writing, for every resident to see and vote on. Let her propose it, Priya said. A public vote creates a public record. Public records can be challenged in court. I spent the next 2 weeks canvassing my own neighborhood, something I never imagined myself doing. Door by door. I explained what the exemption repeal actually meant. Coops gone, gardens capped, even rain barrels banned. Most neighbors had no idea the rule change went that far. Karen's notice buried the details in dense legal language. Dolores organized a small group chat. Within days it had 42 members, all furious, all asking the same question: what else has she hidden? Marcus started digging through old HOA newsletters, cross-referencing landscaping expenses against actual visible improvements. There were almost none. Walter, the treasurer, quietly requested a full third-party audit of the reserve fund, citing irregularities. Karen fought the audit for a week, claiming it would waste HOA resources, an argument that convinced almost no one now. The board, sensing the shifting mood, approved the audit 5 votes to 2. Karen was one of the 2. I felt something unfamiliar stir in my chest, not just anger anymore, but the electric pull of a coming reckoning. 2 nights before the emergency vote, my cameras caught Karen's car again, this time parked directly at my property line. She got out, walked to my fence and began photographing the coop I'd rebuilt after the chicken theft. Except this time she stepped over the survey stake marking my actual property boundary, onto my land, uninvited. My motion light snapped on. She froze like a deer, clipboard falling from her hand into the mud. "You're trespassing, Karen," I said, stepping onto the porch, phone already recording. "This is my land, not HOA land. I have every right to document violations," she snapped, though her voice had lost its usual iron confidence. "Not from inside my fence line." "You don't," I said. "Get off my property before I call the sheriff." She left in a hurry, tires spinning gravel. But the footage was crystal clear now, time-stamped, dated, undeniable. Priya's eyes lit up when she saw it. "This is criminal trespass, Anna. Combined with the harassment pattern, this changes our leverage completely." We filed a formal police report the next morning, attaching the footage as evidence. For the first time since this began, I felt the ground shift beneath Karen's feet instead of mine. The emergency HOA vote arrived. The room packed tighter than I'd ever seen it, folding chairs lining the walls. Karen opened with a passionate speech about protecting property values and maintaining community standards. Then Priya stood, calm as still water, and asked to present evidence before the vote proceeded. The board, wary now, allowed it. Priya played the trespassing footage on the projector, Karen's voice ringing clear through the speakers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face went white, then red, then a shade I'd never seen on her before. That's taken out of context," she stammered. But 40 pairs of eyes had just watched full, unedited context. Walter stood next, holding a thin folder. "The audit results came back early," he said. "We need to discuss this too." The room went dead silent. Even Karen's usual allies on the board shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Walter revealed nearly $11,000 in reserve funds routed to a landscaping company that, per state records, had dissolved 3 years earlier. The company's registered agent, it turned out, was Karen's brother-in-law, using a since-closed business shell. A murmur turned into open outrage. Someone in the back yelled, "That's our money," and no one disagreed. Karen tried to regain control. "This is a coordinated attack," she insisted. "Anna put you all up to this." "No," I said, standing, my voice steadier than I expected. "You put yourselves up to this. I just turned on the lights." The vote on the exemption repeal never even happened. The board tabled it indefinitely amid the chaos. Karen stormed out before the meeting adjourned. But the damage was already done, spreading through the neighborhood group chat in real time. By morning, the story had reached the local Facebook community page, screenshots and all. I didn't post any of it myself. I didn't need to. 42 furious neighbors did it for me. The HOA's regional management company sent a rare, formal notice. An independent investigation into board conduct would begin within the week. Karen went quiet online, which somehow felt louder than anything she'd said in months. Priya warned me not to relax yet. "Cornered people get more dangerous, not less," she said. "Watch your back." I took the warning seriously. I upgraded my cameras, added motion alerts straight to my phone, and locked every gate. 2 days later, an anonymous complaint was filed against me with the county zoning office, alleging illegal livestock operations. The timing wasn't subtle. The complaint arrived exactly 6 hours after the investigation notice went out. A zoning officer, Mr. Reyes, called to schedule an inspection. Apologetic but obligated to follow procedure. I welcomed him with open arms and every document I owned, including the original 1998 agreement. Mr. Reyes walked my property for over an hour, comparing my setup against county agricultural codes point by point. "Everything here is compliant," he finally said. "Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't know the law, or doesn't care." He asked, almost casually, whether I knew who might have filed it. I said I had a strong guess. He couldn't confirm names, but he mentioned the complaint came from an IP address tied to a local business account. Priya subpoenaed that record as part of the ongoing HOA investigation. The IP traced directly to the HOA management office computer. Karen's own login credentials had been used to file it, 20 minutes after her own board meeting ended in disgrace. It was the clumsiest kind of retaliation, angry, rushed, and completely traceable. The investigation committee added the false complaint to their growing file, now labeled Pattern of Retaliatory Conduct. Karen requested a private meeting with the board, hoping to control the narrative before the investigation concluded. Walter denied the request. "Everything happens in open session now," he said. "That's how we got here in the first place." Dolores told me Karen had started avoiding her own street, taking a longer route to skip driving past my farm. Small satisfaction, maybe, but after months of clipboard visits and fines, I allowed myself to enjoy it. Marcus uncovered something else buried in old records. 2 prior families really had sold and moved after near-identical harassment campaigns. Both families, when Priya reached out, agreed to give sworn statements describing the same pattern: fines, surveillance, sudden violations. The investigation file was growing into something much larger than one farm, one coop, one fence line dispute. It was becoming a documented history of one woman weaponizing a homeowners association for years. Karen tried one last public move, a glossy mailer sent to every household defending her record of service. It backfired instantly. Neighbors compared it to the trespassing footage and the missing reserve funds and mocked it openly online. I stayed mostly silent through all of it, letting the evidence speak louder than any statement I could make. Silence, I was learning, could be its own kind of power when the truth was already doing the talking. The management company's investigators requested a formal interview with me regarding the trespassing incident and the pattern of fines. I walked them through everything: dates, photos, the 1998 agreement, the missing hens, the fabricated zoning complaint. They asked if I intended to pursue civil action. I looked at Priya. She simply nodded. Yes, I said. For the fines? For the trespassing? For every hour of stress she caused my family's legacy. Priya filed suit the following week. Harassment, trespass and wrongful assessment of HOA fines, seeking their reversal plus damages. Karen hired her own attorney, a tired-looking man who, from his first phone call with Priya, seemed to already sense he'd drawn a losing hand. Discovery began, and with it came something neither Karen nor I fully expected. Buried in HOA email records was a message from Karen to a board ally, written months before my first violation notice. That farm sits on prime frontage, the email read. If we push hard enough, she'll sell and we control the land use after. It wasn't about chickens. It wasn't even about rules. It was about my land and what Karen hoped to do with it once I was gone. Reading that email felt like the floor tilting sideways. Every fine, every clipboard visit, had been calculated from day one. Priya called it the single most damaging piece of evidence in the entire case. Motive? In her own words, she said. The board's investigation concluded 2 weeks later. Karen was found to have violated fiduciary duty, engaged in retaliatory harassment and misused HOA funds. They voted, 7-0 this time, to remove her from the presidency immediately, pending further review. Karen didn't attend the vote. She sent her resignation by email instead, calling it a personal decision unrelated to the findings. No one believed that for a second, least of all the local paper that picked up the story 2 days later. HOA president resigns amid fraud. Harassment allegations ran above the fold, with my farm's photo included as context. Reporters called asking for comment. I gave one simple line: I just wanted to keep my father's land. That's all I ever wanted. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Karen, cornered, made one final desperate move. Late one night, my cameras caught her again, not near the fence this time, but climbing over my back gate entirely. She wasn't holding a clipboard anymore. She was holding a gas can, walking straight toward my hay storage barn. My heart stopped. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911 with shaking hands and watched the feed in horror. There's someone trespassing on my farm with what looks like a gas can, I told the dispatcher. Voice cracking. I didn't wait inside. I grabbed a flashlight and my father's old air horn and ran toward the barn myself. The blast of the horn sent Karen stumbling backward, gas can clattering to the ground, splashing across the gravel path. Get away from my property, I screamed, horn still ringing in the night air. The police are already coming. For the first time since this began, I saw real fear flash across her face instead of practiced confidence. She turned to run, but the same fence she'd photographed a dozen times now tangled her ankle, sending her sprawling. Red and blue lights swept across the barn wall as 2 patrol cars turned up my long gravel driveway. Officers found Karen on my land, gas can beside her. Motion-triggered footage already backing up my frantic 911 call. Ma'am? Can you explain why you're on private property after midnight with an accelerant? One officer asked, flashlight steady on her face. Karen's excuses came fast and desperate. She'd been checking a violation, she'd gotten lost, the can was for her own generator. None of it matched the footage, time-stamped and clear, showing her climbing the gate with clear intent. They arrested her on the spot for criminal trespass, with the district attorney later adding a charge of attempted arson. I stood in my driveway watching the officer settle her into the back of the patrol car, and I felt strangely calm. Not triumphant. Not yet. Just quiet. The way a held breath finally releases after a very long time. The next morning, the story exploded far beyond our small neighborhood, picked up by regional news outlets within hours. HOA president arrested for trespassing. Attempted arson on resident's farm. The headline read, "My farm's fence visible in the photo." Neighbors I'd barely spoken to stopped by with casseroles and apologies for ever doubting the trouble I'd faced. Dolores hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it. I hadn't done it alone, though. Priya, Walter, Marcus and 42 furious neighbors had carried this fight beside me." Karen's attorney tried to argue diminished responsibility, exhaustion, a difficult year. The judge wasn't moved by any of it. The financial fraud investigation into the missing reserve funds had, by then, wrapped up with damning clarity. Auditors confirmed the $11,000 had gone, in part, to Karen's brother-in-law and, in part, straight to her own accounts. Embezzlement charges were added to the criminal case, stacking on top of trespass and attempted arson. My civil suit, meanwhile, moved swiftly once the criminal case gave it undeniable momentum. The judge reviewed the 1998 agreement, the fabricated zoning complaint, the trespassing footage and the retaliatory email in one sitting. "This is one of the clearest patterns of HOA abuse of power I've seen on this bench," she said aloud. "Every fine Karen had levied against me was reversed. Every dollar, refunded with interest, landed back in my account within weeks." The court additionally awarded damages for harassment and emotional distress, an amount that finally felt like real acknowledgement. Karen accepted a plea deal on the criminal charges rather than risk trial. Trespass, attempted arson and embezzlement, all confirmed. She was sentenced to 18 months, a restitution order for the stolen HOA funds and a permanent ban from any HOA leadership role statewide. The judge added, almost as an afterthought, a formal restraining order barring her from ever stepping onto my property again. I sat in that courtroom and watched the woman who tried to burn down my father's legacy get led away in handcuffs. It didn't feel like triumph exactly. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for the better part of a year. The HOA board, newly reformed under Walter's interim leadership, formally reinstated the agricultural exemption in writing, unanimous vote. They also passed new transparency rules, public meeting minutes, third-party audits, mandatory conflict of interest disclosures for every board member. Dolores joked that the neighborhood should rename the exemption clause Anna's Law. The name, somehow, stuck. Marcus and the two families who'd left years earlier finally received public apologies and partial reimbursement from the HOA's insurance fund. I rebuilt my chicken coop that spring, sturdier this time, with cameras I no longer needed but kept anyway, out of habit. My hens came back too, a new flock, clucking around the same dirt my father used to walk barefoot in July. I planted a row of sunflowers along the fence line Karen used to photograph, facing outward, impossible to miss from the road. Some nights I still catch myself listening for tires on gravel, old fear taking its time to fully let go. But mostly now I hear crickets and goats settling in the barn and wind moving through the orchard my father planted. Priya sends a card every spring. Always the same message, told you the truth wins if you're patient enough to prove it. I framed the original 1998 agreement and hung it inside the farmhouse door, my father's careful signature catching morning light. I think about how close I came to just selling, just leaving, just letting Karen win by attrition alone. I think about all the families before me who did exactly that, worn down before they ever got the chance to fight. This land was never just dirt and fencing. It was every early morning my father spent teaching me patience. Karen thought a clipboard and a title made her untouchable. She forgot that paperwork cuts both ways. The victory cost me sleep, savings and a year I can never get back, wrapped in stress that still lingers some mornings. But it also gave me something Karen never understood, a community that finally stood shoulder to shoulder instead of looking away. My father used to say the land always remembers who tends it honestly. I believe that more now than ever. Every sunflower blooming along that fence line is proof, quiet, stubborn, impossible to ignore, that I was right to stay. And every time headlights slow near my gate, I just smile, because for the first time in a year, I have nothing left to hide.